Uh-oh, new mistake. All right, I guess we're starting over. My bad. It's too fancy looking. So anyways, hello and welcome to Guild Wars 2 Guru State of the Game Stream, a monthly podcast focused on Guild Wars 2's competitive PvP. Each episode we strive to bring top-tier players to discuss various aspects of the game. Occasionally you might see a dev or two. Today we're joined by two. We have John Peters and John Sharp.
Hey guys.
Yeah, so hopefully it won't be too confusing. I tried to get the little name tags going right, so just as long as you guys don't switch seats, we should be fine. We are also joined by Java from Team PZ.
Hello.
All right. We also have Lowell from Team Curse.
Hey
I made
guys.
some comments about him having the best hair EU, but I think the moment's gone. It's past.
Too late now.
Yeah, it's too late. You guys missed it. So yeah, I guess we'll kind of just jump right into it then. I guess you guys ready?
Sure.
Yeah.
Let's go.
All right.
Time.
So this is actually Sharp's second time on the show. Thanks for coming back.
Yeah, no
Appreciate
problem. Good to be here.
So I guess we'll just kind of
he's
go
a pro.
I'm a pro. You're
Yeah.
new.
Yeah.
He's a bro. I guess the biggest thing in the past week or two is Temple of Silent Storm Test Week. The changes from the 8-team tournaments to the 2-team tournament system. I kind of just want to get your guys' impression, at least from the development side. How did that go for you guys?
Really, really, really well.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, as it turns out, finding 2 teams is a lot easier than finding 8. So that was helpful. Yeah. Right?
Sure. We basically wanted to try the 8-team thing. It wasn't working as well as we wanted for the paid stuff, so we went down to just the 2 teams, which brings down the barrier to entry because you only need 10 players instead of obviously 40. And then we brought down the entry fee, which was another barrier to entry. So we brought both of those down, and the numbers have gone up really, really quickly. Numbers are going up even as we speak, which is really exciting. So it was obviously the right change, something we wanted to try, and then the players were asking for it as well, so we decided to try it, and it was a really good change. So.
Yeah, something we've been talking about for a little while too, and we had to get it all nailed down so we could make it work right. But
and the players wanted it too, so
yeah,
and it went really well. So we do listen to you guys, and it seems like it was what everybody wanted. So.
All right. How about Java and Lowell? I mean, pretty much. I guess the unanimous opinion is that everyone enjoyed it. I personally think it's a lot better. What do you guys think?
Go ahead, Java.
it was really fun the first couple of days. Obviously, after a few days, we're playing the same map over and over and the same team over and over, so it gets a bit tedious. But it's good that the matchmaking's here and that the 2-team thing's here. But hopefully we can get some different maps, from game to game, different teams game to game. Maybe prevention on facing the same team twice in a row, because that's really annoying.
Sure. And part of that for the the maps, we do want to go to more of a rotating system. But right now what we're doing is just one per week. Basically, we're going to rotate it because it lets us also study the meta. How does the meta change? What are the imbalances with each map? If we just did a rotating thing that could be random, then at any time you kind of have to build a really generic build to be good on all maps, which we feel like that might not be good. It might just mean that everybody runs the exact same build because any map could pop up. So for right now, we're going to keep to one map per week and try that and see how it looks. So.
Are you just going to do that through the first rotation of all the maps, or is that something you plan on keeping for months?
I think the next week we'll definitely have a new map, and then if after a week everyone is like, please change it more than once a week, then we'll probably talk about it, right?
Yeah.
It's more like,
well, I think
it's a pretty flexible thing on our end, but there are benefits for us, so that's why we're doing it this way for now.
right. Like, I can definitely see for the data collection, like you said, for the first rotation through all of the maps. But
sure.
I think people are going to want variety. I didn't play nearly as much as like PZ or any of the other teams or whatever, but I did play quite a bit, and it kind of wore on me after a little while. Just playing Temple over and over, and I wanted to play those other maps. So I think everyone, or not, I guess I can't speak for everyone, but I think I would like to see multiple maps in the rotation.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when we're playing 10 hours a day on the same map for an entire week, it just makes us not want to play.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah, same feeling over here. But yeah, at least we can play any hour of the day right now in paids, which was far from being true before. So it's quite amazing already.
And yeah, we're trying to find that balance too between like other games will have systems where you basically like thumbs up and thumbs down stuff, or thumbs down maps that you just don't want to play on, and then between the 2 teams you can only have so many thumbs down, so it kind of picks what you actually get to play on that way. So you can kind of cater your build to the stuff you don't want to play on. We're looking at stuff like that. We're looking at maybe it's just completely random, which, as I said earlier, might not be the best thing for the game. So we're playing around right now with the idea of, okay, well, we want to go to multiple maps in this format, but what's the best way to do that. So that's why we wanted to get data first to see what the players felt and see what the stats look like after we do just one map and then another map and then another map. So we'll see.
I guess you mentioned in a post yesterday that the MMR system that everyone kind of thought was already implemented was definitely in. At least for now, that system is it's not visible. Like I can't tell what my rating is. I can't tell what anyone else's rating is. Do you have any plans on making that visible?
Not directly, but we have other features that are going to do that stuff for you. Can't say too much, but all the ratings and the matchmaking that feeds into something else. So
okay, all right.
Give you too many details, but yeah, that's something else. So
Right.
trying to be tight-lipped on it.
We want to make it meaningful,
Right.
more meaningful than just, hey, you're playing teams that are of equal skill.
Sure.
More meaningful than just that.
We want you to go somewhere with it, so
There needs to be some sort of,
progression to why you're playing the game outside of the game.
some
What-
sort of
what's the
motivation
reward?
too for players that aren't self-motivated to play 10 hours a day like Java
Sure.
is, right?
And low
Like
end.
we need people who are motivated, like not motivated on their own, but motivated by, something else. And that's something we're definitely working on.
Do you know
but-
when you might get that motivation?
I don't want to say soon because
I do when it's done.
Sure, when it's done.
Soon.
Soon when it's done.
Yeah.
When it's done soon. But really though, let's talk about that real quick. We do have other features that the people in the forums have asked about. There's actually things being developed right now that we are working on that are actually closer to done than we are able to say. Matchmaking is an example that we didn't really talk about it. Nobody knew about it, but we already had it up and going. We had it running. We sat there for about. I was on the forums. Watched people like, I think matchmaking's in. I'm pretty sure it's in. And then people were like, no, shut up, dude. It can't be in. It's impossible. It's random. I was like, I want to say that. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is, guys. We just can't talk about the stuff until it's really ready. So that's why we had to wait, do an official blog post, go through the right channels. But there's other stuff that we are working on that's also, people might not know it's there, but it's closer than they probably realize. So that's good.
Just a quick question about matchmaking. Can you tell us what it takes into account right now,
Sure.
or not at all?
Yeah, we can talk about it a little. You wanna talk
Yeah,
about it?
I mean, it's big.
It's pretty what you would expect. It's going to be looking at basically the aggregate score for a team. So let's say that you have 4 players who are just off the charts good, and they have somebody on there who's really not good. Then that's going to bring down the average for the team. Then that average for the team is then matched up against the averages for other teams, and stuff like that. It's pretty much what you would expect from this type of format.
I know we're also trying to look at how cohesive the team is.
Mhm.
Like looking at a team of 5 that signed up as 5
Sure.
is more likely to match up against a team of 5 that signed up as 5, even if they're closer in rating maybe to 5 individuals that signed up, because
Sure.
it's likely that as a team they're more organized. So, right, it's like how composed your team is into a single party, the ratings of the members on your team.
Mhm.
I don't know that there's much else that can matter beyond that.
It also some other things that we do too is we look at the basically the age of your rating, to kind of use a term. How long have you been actually at this rating? How true is it to you? Did you just get lucky one week and you just shot right up the ladder, or were you on a really big downslide? It takes time to actually develop that rating. So basically what it does is it says, how volatile is my rating right now? And it looks at stuff like that too. So it's a lot of the stuff that you would expect from some of the current matchmaking schemes. We're taking those into account with ours too. So.
And part of why we couldn't really let the cat out of the bag too, right? Of people see it's there, but we can't talk about it because if it's not working right, we don't want to say, oh yeah, it's in, but we're actually people our curve of distribution of people's ratings could be completely off, and that's why we don't. That's actually one of the reasons why we don't want to show it yet is we want to make sure that the formula we're using is actually functioning completely before we say, oh yeah, turn it on. It's oh, that guy just shot up when he shouldn't have. It should work before we rank
and
people.
for maybe the fans who have actually studied the ELO systems, the Glico systems, that type of true skill systems, there's a lot of little dials that you can kind of tweak inside of your formula. So we're also playing with that kind of stuff with our formula, looking at what do you want the volatility to be, how long should it take to actually earn a true rating, and all that kind of stuff. So we're playing with a lot of those. So to the point of actually showing your rating, we're not sure that's something that we want to show right now, even if it was completely solid in the formula, because we don't want people to just be like, oh, I'm not going to play because I don't want to lose rating. You know what I mean? We want you to think that it's the rank. That's what's really important. Your rank in the world. That's what's really important. The rank, among your peers. It's really not the rating itself. We don't want you to feel like, oh, I just lost, 32 points today. I'm not gonna play
Right,
today.
and it's sort of a meaningless number. Like Java, it's like your rating is 3,072, and it's like
Yeah.
no one knows what that means. But if like your rank is 2, right, you're like, okay, I need to pass one
Yeah.
more person,
Yeah,
right?
so
Like there's no.
If you have Curse and then you have, let's say that you had PZ and they're both looking at each other, the rating is not important. What's important is whose is higher, which is basically just your rank in relation to each other. So the rating itself is a pretty arbitrary thing.
Right.
It's really just how you guys rank against one another. So
Doesn't Glicko have like a rating decay based on like inactivity?
it does. Yep.
Okay, so wouldn't that kind of combat the people not wanting to play in order to keep their rating high?
Depends on the players. We think that there's a difference in like a really high player who actually understands all the factors that goes into that, and then somebody who is basically a brand new player who doesn't understand how any of those things work. So if we expose all that stuff, let's say that I'm a new player and I'm like, if I don't play, well, I'm losing points for not playing. Okay, then I feel like I have to jump on and I have to play. You know what I mean? We want to be careful with that because this is the same thing as our business model. We don't want you to feel like you have to pay $15 every single month. Every single night that you're not playing, you're basically throwing away money. We don't want you to feel that way.
Right. And like
So-
John said, there are knobs. It's like we don't need to expose like how long until the decay starts. What's the rate at which the decay goes? Like what does the decay mean for when
Sure.
you come back? Like that stuff shouldn't be on players' minds. They should just be thinking like I want to play and win and move up. Right?
Sure.
Like it shouldn't be worrying. They shouldn't be worrying about that because that's not actually fun. At least to me, it's not fun to like worry about what the formula is for what my rating is. It's like
But
I'd
at
rather
the same time, there are some players who
Yeah.
who are like that. So we're just trying to find that balance between what we do expose and what we don't expose, just to make sure that it keeps it fun and gives players enough information to understand how the ratings are basically determined without giving away everything so that some people are just completely overwhelmed, which is kind of just a philosophy thing.
And I think if we got our ratings to a point where we thought we weren't going to be tuning those knobs anymore, we'd
Sure.
probably be more likely to show them. But until we get to that point, it's kind of disingenuous to show it when it's really,
Sure. We
not
can
necessarily.
work on it.
We still may be still working on
Sure.
that number.
I've talked with Java quite a bit about. He mentioned playing the same team over and over and over again if you're stuck in the same basically matchmaking range.
Sure.
Do you guys have any plans on doing something to prevent that? Maybe like a team-based MMR rather than individual or something like that?
Yeah, we do have plans for that. And also what we're seeing right now is that as people are coming in, we're having a lot more people starting to play and earn basically their ratings and starting to get match made. So before what we think that was happening was like guys with like Java and Lowell skill, there were so few teams who were playing, they were basically just bumping into each other all the time. So this is the same thing we had in Guild Wars 1, that at the top of the ladder, when I was playing Guild Wars 1, we had the same problem. We were always playing the top 10 all the time. And then there'd be times when they would drop off and then we'd start playing 20s or 30s, if you can imagine. So right now, I think that's going to be two things. Number one is as the numbers are going up for total teams, that's going to get better. But then also the way that it works right now is if it can't find a game inside of your bracket, it'll expand to try to find somebody outside of your bracket. That's what it'll do. But right now, it sounds like it's always finding the other team or the other teams that are close to you guys, which is why you keep fighting the same people over and over again.
Yeah, and you talked, Java, about like timeout of like we just played these guys, and this system is kind of right now piggybacked on the tournament system, and it needs to be its own thing, and we are working towards that. And I think as it does, then it can incorporate rules that make sense for this one-on-one system that didn't make sense in the tournament system.
Sure.
Just a little something about the rating that you guys were talking about. But if it's individual player rating, and that the team rating is like just all the ratings put together, aren't you concerned about the fact that like people might not want to solo queue or play with friends that aren't extremely good because they risk losing rating and bringing their team down? Like, kinda.
Don't want to say too much, but we have considered doing multiple types of ratings and different subsettings of ratings. For instance, if I'm playing by myself, am I playing with a team? Is it somebody I played with before? That type of stuff. So I can't give away too much info yet, but yeah, we are taking that into consideration because one thing that keeps coming up is you look at the free tournaments that we have right now. A lot of I play a lot just by myself. If nobody at work can play, I'll just jump in and play by myself. But that's a different style than when I actually want to play a paid, which is with an organized 5-man team. So I think that playing by yourself is something different than just playing with an organized 5-man team. So I think that those are it's almost kind of like two ratings in a sense. You know what I mean?
We talked about that a little bit with like trying to match, like when you solo queue, you're more likely to get matched up against another team of solo queues, and so you're more likely to be okay. And it sounds a little bit harsh too, but it's sort of probability. Like if you are that rating is that high and like that drags your team's rating up, you're likely to just be able to take that game over and just win it. Like you know this, especially with the way our game plays, right? Like a player whose rating is high is a very good player, and they can basically dominate an entire game. So you're gonna see that, like even if it's your high rating and a bunch of low rating guys against a bunch of 5 random scattered together medium rating guys, like it will work itself out, right? And it's like if you can't win that game, then probably your rating shouldn't be that high. I mean, to some extent, not that we want to discourage teams from kind of building up a team identity as a highly rated team, but I think it will to some extent work itself out. That's kind of the purpose of those Elo and Glico type systems, is to work at those problems out.
Was MMR patched in like a ninja patch, or was it from the start?
It was recent. The way that some of that stuff works is we're able to actually test things without using builds because of the way that our infrastructure works. So we can actually, for instance, we put out the stuff about, hey, we're going to be moving to the one-on-one format, and immediately I put the thing about like we're extending it on the forums, and people's first response was basically what Java said: does it have to be this map? Like, can we switch to a different map? So then I immediately went to the PvP guys and I said, hey, they really like it. They like the system. The thing they don't like is the map. So we said, okay, let's change the map. Went to the server programmer, different map. Like it's some of those things we can kind of ninja in on the back end. So yeah.
Okay, all right, fair enough. How long did it take to gather the data then to get people like PZ, for example? How long did it take for them to get where they should be?
It took. I can't give exact numbers because I probably shouldn't divulge that kind of stuff. But it was basically.
How do we know? We don't. First of all, we don't really know if they are where they should be.
They might be scrubs and they just don't even. We don't even know that. Right? I don't know.
Mortis fired.
Yeah. No, we still have numbers coming in though for some of those guys. But we're starting to see basically, if you can imagine, the volatility of a lot of is starting to actually level out for a lot of people. So we're starting to get what we consider to be really true measurements of where they should be. So we're
like
seeing.
I know in League, like with your first 10 games you do of ranked, you have like a boost your elo. You get more elo for those first 10 games. The same way as this, or?
We have some systems also. I mean, to kind of give some stuff away about what we've studied, but like like in StarCraft 2, right? Like whenever you play StarCraft 2, you actually get rated based off your first few games. Am I going to be gold or diamond or masters, what have you, right? That's the kind of we have something like that too, where we're trying to look at generally where should this player be, that kind of stuff. So
and then like you said, I don't know if you know, like the Glico stuff, it definitely has a more like has more volatility, like taken into account. Like if Java doesn't play for 2 months, like he comes back, like those games are probably going to matter a little bit more, depending on what's happening, especially if he's losing them, because it's going to be like, okay, he's been away a while, he's losing, he's rusty, and we have to push him down until he catches back up again, right? So, depending on how, like the rating loses its like its trueness, right? The further away it's been since it's been played, right?
But the more consistent you are, like if Lowell's playing a lot too, like it's just the more consistent it becomes, we know that that's a true number. So it's a stronger number inside of the formula that we know that's a truer number for their skill if it's really consistent with what they do every day. So if they're playing a lot, it's going to be much quicker to generate that true number.
Right. So it's not like built in, like by the way, it's the first 10 games and then it goes away. Like it's just part of how the system works for us, right?
All right, fair enough. I guess we'll kind of move on. I want to talk a little bit about Temple Sound Storm, and then I guess we'll talk about your new map that you announced yesterday. I think the big thing everyone, when it comes to this map, everyone talks about is the secondary objectives. How do you feel in relation to how strong they are? I mean, they seem to really affect the game right now in terms of the outcome.
So we went a little hard on that. One of our favorite maps, I think, for the amount of control a skilled team can put onto the map is basically the Battle of Kylo, and the way that the Trebuchet works. That a really good team using the Trebuchet well, keeping the other team's Trebuchet down, gets a lot of control over the map. So we wanted to see these buffs be really control-y as well, so that really good execution on those allows you to control the map, allows you to come back maybe if you're really far behind, allows you to say, okay, let's go for the double cap right now. Bam, let's get double cap, let's get kill count. Okay, wait, watch for it. Okay, bottom buffs up, go for it now. We wanted to have that kind of strategic play, but we can bring down those numbers too on those things if we need to. So we've been watching a lot of things that we're seeing from people, and just to make sure that there is enough control there, but it's not too much. And at the same time, there are some bugs right now that we want to address, like the fact that some people can actually go invuln and cap, which is just that's not cool.
So those are obviously not intended.
Portal cap and vuln cap, like miscapping or whatever, like that's not intended and it's going to go away.
It just means that those.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of it literally we've already figured out how to make it go away, and then some of it is trickier, right? So it kind of depends on the bug, but the goal is to not have any dumb cheesy caps, right? Like.
right.
Because if you look across the maps, right, if you're on a cap point, you go invuln, right, you don't count for that. So that's one thing we're trying to. If you're going to be a bunker, or let's just say that you're taking a really defensive skill, that you're kind of taking yourself out of the game for a small time. So that same philosophy is what we want to carry over to the caps. Of like, if you're kind of taking yourself out, you can't be damaged. Okay, then you shouldn't be able to cap the buff either. That should be a risk. You should really have to, try to mitigate that risk when you go in to get the buff. It shouldn't be free for you to do that. That's not cool. It also means that certain classes just become basically mandatory for that map, which we don't want either. So.
How do you feel about the relative strength of those the buffs though? Like you can 6-cap someone essentially right now.
Yeah. We think that here was one of the things we wanted to see really big come from behinds, and we've seen some of those that just watching people, it's like, oh my lord, these guys are completely out. Oh, they got a buff. Well, that was really. Oh, they got a second buff. Oh, they're going to come back on this. Holy crap! We kind of wanted to see that kind of play. Maybe it's too extreme right now, but again, those are dials on that map that we can tweak how much you get for some of those caps.
I mean, to some extent, the 6 cap is just extraordinarily strong. Obviously, and it's not 3 capping someone is dominant, right? So we know 6 cap is too, but at the same time, like if you get 3 capped, like you've kind of made mistakes, right? And if you get 6 capped, you've made way more mistakes than that because you've given up all 3 points and somehow let them get that buff, right? So it's kind of analogous to they have this thing where it's like, oh, no teams ever come back when they're down 3-0 in a playoff series, in like sports, and it's like everyone is like, oh, that's crazy. And it's like the real reason why is if you're down 3-0, you're probably worse. You're just a worse team, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, it's just this stigma that it's like, oh, it's just that they don't do it. Well, the reason why they don't do it even more than you think is because the team that falls behind.
Weren't the Red Sox down 3-0 or something?
That's nice.
So the worst team?
Yeah. So, generally when you're down 3-0, that's like an indication that, in fact, you're just worse, right? And so
sure.
I don't want to say that, hey, getting 6 cap is you're doing it because you're terrible, but to some extent, you have to make a lot of mistakes to get to that point.
But let's talk about something too with the matchmaking and how these go together. One thing that happens sometimes in the forums, sometimes chatting with players, I'll jump in, I'll just start talking to players. You kind of just hear anecdotally like, oh, this thing is completely broken, you can't be done. Then somebody else is like, no, actually we do that just fine. Those two guys never play each other. With matchmaking, they are starting to play each other. So we can get hard evidence on, okay, when this really strong team plays this really strong team, what's the outcome? And we can actually just say, okay, we know exactly what's happening and how that map is playing at that level. And then at the low low, we can say, how is this map playing? Like we actually have the ability to do that, which is going to let us make a lot more balance changes to all the maps and to classes and skills and trait lines and all that stuff. So we have a lot more control over that stuff now because of the data that we're getting right now. So.
All right. Well, speaking of which, then I kind of want to get Lowell and Java's opinion. We'll start with Lowell on. How did you feel the secondary mechanic on Temple?
Well, I like the concept of buffs, etc. I think like the upper one, like the one that gives you 6 cap if you got a 3 cap already, is too strong, obviously. But that's about it. As for the invuln caps, ace caps, or shadow step caps, whatever, seems cheesy yet. Like some can be countered, some cannot at all. Like there are some bugs, like after a mist form at 60%, you cannot interrupt anymore, even if he comes out of mist form. Like just weird stuff, and that makes it a little bit sad. But as for the rest, like the buffs are a cool concept.
All right, how about you, Java?
I like the map a lot. It's my favorite map. I think for people watching it, like for spectating, I think it's a very good map because, as the Johns have said, you can make some pretty good comebacks on that map.
Yeah.
So I really like that. I like the fact that the buffs spawn later into the game, which directly speaks to the concept of making a comeback and not just dominating or snowballing really hard at the beginning, because you can't get those buffs till later on. And it makes the timing of you attacking them really important, which a lot of teams haven't come on to yet, because what we're aiming to do on that map is kill them like at the time the buffs are about to come up. Like we try and avoid them at the time above that or coming up on that, because like there's no point in killing them then. If they're respawning with full health close to that, it adds a lot more strategy that the other maps don't have, and I like that a lot.
And you'll notice too, like that's one thing that you've talked about is we try to push the time back on those buffs. On the Forest of Niflhel, you have the 2 NPCs, and that's one of those things where we kind of left them out. In early iterations of the map, we didn't spawn them until really deep in the game, and we found that it was kind of boring just because of the 3 caps. There was really nothing else to do. So that map just has really different openings, different gambits, and we really wanted this map to have more of a late game come from behind type of things. That's why we've kind of done more of a a different approach on that map to kind of test what those two different systems feel like inside of our game. So,
and I think that's to be said to like the whole. I know everyone wants like all these other game types, but I think we get more polished and better diversity out of just going wild with our secondaries than we do by trying to balance like an entirely new game type and creating a bunch of problems with that. Right? That's why you see like if you to transition to the new map a little bit, like the new map like drastically encourages like some running stuff that we just don't have anywhere else, and
sure,
it plays really differently because of that.
Sure.
So.
And that's too, like we've talked about, people want, they want capture the flag, or they want deathmatch, or they give us a MOBA game, that kind of thing. What we can do with our secondaries is we can kind of push each of those aspects of those games and put that into the context of the Conquest. Conquest is our game type for now. That we could try something completely new later. But some of the things we have tried, like a long time ago, we tried just a deathmatch game. We tried it, and it was basically a lot of people just sitting around, not wanting to engage, not wanting to fight. They would basically not fight unless they had their elites up, and then they would go in a fight. After that, they would avoid each other again. It was just. Then we said, okay, well, let's put in a cap point and see if that gets people to fight. And it was forced a lot of action. It forced a lot of fighting. But then that became basically, let's just run to the middle and kill each other because it's just one cap point. And then we said, okay, let's put in some flanking stuff.
And there was a point in development where they were essentially like, okay, we're going to ship with 4 game types instead of 4 maps.
Mm-hmm.
And we were playing them, and honestly, like, maybe it's, the PvP really just wasn't fun at the time to some extent. And
sure.
One of the reasons why that we realized at that point was we looked at those and we're like, well, which of these is the most fun? And it was like, oh, it's this one cap point map.
Yeah.
And we kind of analyzed it for a while and realized, like, well, probably the thing that makes it the most fun is actually the game type, because it's encouraging all the like positioning and stuff that we've built into the combat. And then at that point we said, all right, like, game types aside, like, let's just take that one map, polish that one map. And it wasn't until we basically focused on a game type and focused on polishing that game type that the game actually became fun from a PvP standpoint. And I think that's like was an indicator to us that, and you see this in other popular esport like games, that like they focus on a single game type because it lets them make that game type. It makes the fighting in the game and every aspect of the game polished towards that thing, and that's really what ends up defining what makes those games good, and not the fact that you can just do everything in them. I don't, for me at least, like I don't play a lot of games that have like 20 game modes, because in the end, like none of them are really that good. Whereas like I play the MOBA game because it's like they absolutely polished that style, right? They polished the lane camping and like the jungling, and they polished all the aspects of that game. And I think that's important for us, that like I'd rather work on polishing like the back and forth of like the meta of like bunkers and roaming and all that in our cap point thing than like introduce another thing that we now have all these other aspects that we have to deal with.
But at the same time, it's like once we have the conquest stuff down, now we're starting to experiment. Okay,
right.
How far can we push the secondary mechanic? Like, how do we just throw capture the flag right on top of that and see how it feels?
Right.
You know what I mean? Do we just throw like a MOBA game right on top of that and see how it feels? Do we just throw just deathmatch aspects onto it and just see how it feels? Which is kind of where you get the buffs and stuff too. Like, for the newest map is like you just get more points for killing people. You just get more points for each of your kills.
Right.
That's kind of what we're trying to push and learn from the player base, is like we want to push this as far as we can and see what people are going to respond with.
Right. So, Temple was definitely like the push towards like what happens if you introduce a bunch of just deathmatch into it, as you were saying, Java. Like you get that like there's legitimate deathmatch moments because it's like we're going to kill this guy right now in order to take this buff.
And I don't know how much you guys. Maybe I'm too old. Maybe this would be like if you play Quake 2, Quake 3, Unreal Tournament. Like there was a lot of strategy to killing the guy when you know that certain buffs are coming up, which is exactly what we were thinking that Java and Lowell kind of alluded to. That I know when this next buff is going to come up, I'm going to attack the guy, be really aggro right now. Bam, he's down. So he's down. I can get the buffs when I need them. I can get the weapons when they respawn when I need them. Now I have a really strong position. There's a lot of strategy to that. So that's why we're trying to take inspiration from other games and say, how do we get that into the conquest stuff that we enjoy?
Okay, I thought you were going to say Quake 1. It's like DM6.
Nobody
DM6, red armor. You
Quake
would
2,
camp that,
Quake 2,
and then
Quake
you
2.
come in.
Quake 2, Quake 3, Unreal. Railgun dude.
Lightning gun, get the little ring, go invis, take them out, take the red armor.
Sure.
Sorry.
I don't think there's
we could get derailed easily.
I don't think there's a map quite like Temple that focuses on the secondary objectives quite as much, especially since in Forest, the mobs were like, what, 50 points originally when on release? Do you have any plans of going back and like rebalancing secondary objectives on other maps, or looking at them again, making them more viable?
Yes, we do. Another one that's a good example is Legacy of the Foe Fire. The concept is really cool for that map, but just the secondary map doesn't really come into play. Basically, it becomes a 3-cap map, and that's just not what we're looking for. But let's say that if you actually do kill the Guild Lord, you just win instantly. All of a sudden, I care a lot more about the Guild Lord than I did before. So that's the type of stuff that we're looking at, balancing that stuff to try to get it right, to get that really good balance between the stress of having to take care of all 3 cap points as well as control the secondary. And that's where the good teams, like the Lowell and Java, these guys, they're going to be able to really exploit that, because it's like they have control over the map and the secondary mechanics, all the cap points, the lanes. That's where the skill comes in, of orchestrating all that stuff together.
Yeah.
All right. I had a couple people ask me, is the MMR system going to be in free tournaments as well?
Yeah, we have. We talked a little bit earlier about having maybe the concept of different types of ratings. So yeah, that kind of stuff, it does factor into where you're playing when you're actually getting your rating. So I can't give away too much, but yeah, we do factor in that stuff too.
Okay, and will free tournaments be going to the 1v1 system at all, or will they still be the 18?
Yeah, we're looking at that right now. We're also looking at once we start to introduce the daily tournaments. So let's talk about that real quick, actually. A lot of people, so we really enjoy the aspect of it's much easier to get a paid game now. It's much easier to get that. But there is something cool to, getting through multiple rounds of a tournament and beating out people and seeing your placement and all that kind of stuff. There's something cool to that. So we're going to be looking at maybe that becomes more of what we're doing for the daily and the monthlies. And then we come to more of a quicker, faster paced matchmaking system for just the normal stuff you do in free and in paid. So we're trying to find the perfect balance between those two systems, because it is really cool to see a huge tournament and then see the brackets and all that stuff and see who's actually moving through and all that kind of stuff. So we want to keep some of that might just shift over to the dailies and monthlies, and we keep free and paid be more of a quick one-on-one thing.
And John likes to talk about like this future stuff, and I know we get a lot of blowback of like, oh, if we ever have those things. And I just want to say, like, I like to say this often, like it's much more like when we have it, and I'm not saying like the set answer to when we have it is going to be satisfying, right? But like it's not like, oh, we never are going to do this. Like we have these things in our head, and like the game is doing well. Like we are going to add these things to the game, and there is going to be a point at which there will be, these scheduled tournaments. But it's just we honestly don't even know when exactly. We just know that we are working towards these things. And so for those people who are like, oh, they're never going to have this, they're never, like, we will have all those things. It's just a matter of when and if.
And like, a lot of stuff is stealth that we can't talk about yet.
Yeah.
That's actually just further along than we can honestly say. So I don't want to get in trouble and say soon. Yeah. I've gotten in trouble with that. Like there's chaplain time apparently.
Yes.
And there's soon. So I don't want to get into that, but yeah, those things are coming.
All right. Well, I guess this is a good opportunity. Lowell had a question, essentially regarding the future of the game in terms of esports. So, Lowell, have at it.
Go for it, Lowell.
Oh yeah. It was just about the fact that, as you know, like sometime in the past, the game was kind of marketed somehow as a would-be esport. There was that ESL shoutcast, like everything, and I think that brought quite a lot of people to it actually. And yeah, just wanted to say to ask whether or not you have anything specific, like plans ready for after Observer mode and custom games are in. Like, I don't know, partnership with some leagues, any big LAN events, DreamHack Summer maybe? DreamHack's kind of open to new games?
It's not a question of if.
Yeah, again, it's the same answer, right? That's like this is one thing, because it's like we had a lot of that stuff, and I think there are people who agree that it has a lot of that potential. What? So, yeah, and the people agree that it had a lot of potential, and like John, he wrote something down that I'm going to just steal from him, but basically it's like we're not going to ship the game as an esport because it just doesn't make sense. Like we have to learn things about how people are playing the game in order to support it at, not every sport is the same, and we have to figure out how to support it as a sport first. So we can't just ship with all these things. Like if we had done that, look, we have like these 8-team tournaments, but obviously like it wasn't the right thing, and we've kind of learned and moved to like the team versus team. And when that all settles down is when we feel like it's comfortable as an esport that we can kind of start doing those things. And by start doing them, I mean start literally doing them as opposed to the background work that's happening for them already, right?
Yeah. That's what it makes us. I think too that one thing that's happened is a lot of people, like, you said it'd be an esport. You said it, like, that's our intention. Yeah, that doesn't mean it's going to happen overnight. And if you look at the track record for other esports, a lot of them actually took a couple of years to kind of get going. You know what I mean? Even StarCraft, back when I'm really old, played StarCraft 1 a lot. Back when we were playing all of our international tournaments, it took a while to get that stuff orchestrated and set up. A lot of my friends didn't start playing in Korea until 2, 3, 4 years after the game was out. Like, it took a while to kind of get that stuff rolling. So we're kind of, I think people forget that just because another game might have a lot of infrastructure set up for something, that doesn't mean that we can just have it. We have to build all those things ourselves too. So everything, we can't borrow their code and borrow their art and borrow their sound effects and borrow their design. We have to do that stuff ourselves. So that's why we're not to give too much away, but there's a lot of burners being used right now in the background that we're kind of getting things ready. And then when we feel like the game is ready for that, once we feel like we have it solidified, then we'll be like, okay, now let's start that push.
All right, we got one last question, then we'll head into like you guys want to talk about metagame and balance and whatnot. The new map you guys you mentioned yesterday. Can you tell us about it a little bit?
The new map?
The new map, yeah.
I don't know, there's like, I know we have like a post that is eventually going to detail it more.
Yeah, we're going to do it.
But I mean, the basics is, you were talking about how Temple is pushing the limits of the secondary to be very, very, like, changing the game.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely feel like this map does that also, that it really basically puts this thing, like, it's almost like a hybrid game type, because there's literally almost as much scoring going on from the running as there is from the capping.
Do you want to talk about the high level of how the map works?
Yeah,
Maybe people don't know.
Yeah, so you could...
Yeah,
Go
sure.
ahead, John.
Basically, it's the concept. We have an orb that you can use, which is essentially like a flag. If you take this orb to the different cap points, you're going to be getting bonuses because of that. So the numbers on that,
Points.
just like on all of our
Extra
opponents,
points.
yeah,
Extra
sorry, points. It's the same kind of concept. We really want the secondary mechanic to be really strong. So the team has to orchestrate. We have to control the entire map, but we also have to run this thing. We're trying to basically capture the flag at the same time we're trying to play a three-point conquest map. So we're trying to experiment with a coalescence between those two different types of genres and see how that's going to play out. That's kind of what we're experimenting with.
Right, and I think we want to work with the teams having strategies where they're like, okay, well, we're going to try and ignore the orb and 3-cap, and we're going to try and go 2-cap and harass the orb, and we're going to go 1-cap and run the orb, and like that should be enough, right, to like put pressure on the other team to think about, oh, like they're just holding they're just holding their point and orb running, and it's like that going to be, what do we need to do? Do we need to push out and slow them down? Do we need to try and 3-cap them? And the team that's 1-cap and orb, do they need to push out sometimes and go to 2-caps when they're not running the orb as fast? So a lot of different kind of meta games.
I think it was Java or Lowell, I forget who, but you guys brought up a great point earlier about just the spectator ramifications of some of these maps. We're definitely thinking about that, because if you just have an orb that you're trying to cap and move around, it's really easy for a shoutcaster to grab onto that and focus the spectator to say, this is what's happening. We have the 3 different caps, but we're also having a really big fight right here, basically over the ball, basically over the flag that they're trying to cap with. So that really helps people to understand how to watch the game and learn the game, and it makes it easier for somebody to explain that to them. Like Forest, it might be a little bit harder that there's these 2 NPCs. I'll try to move the camera over there when those are coming up and let you guys see those fights. We're just trying to keep in mind that we want to make a game that's really easy for people to spectate and to learn from. So that's another thing that we're trying to factor into this map, is that capture the flag is pretty easy to watch if you balance that out with 3 cap points too. So.
All right. With that, I guess we'll just kind of head over to the meta game balance, whatever discussion. This is interesting, and it's gonna invoke a lot of tears. So we'll try to be as nice as possible.
Sure.
I will say that I think any time that you double up on a profession, or that you use 3 professions of the same profession, and it like multiplies the effectiveness of your team, I think that kind of just is a testament to how unbalanced something might be.
Sure.
I even for example, in chat right now, Zeus is a known elementalist. He elements at a top tier, and even he thinks that Ellie's sustain should be nerfed. Like it's too strong. I've been playing Ellie recently, and it's pretty strong.
Ellie's are strong?
We run 5 engineers. I don't know what you guys run. Maybe that's why we suck. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's balance stuff is happening for the Ellie. Yeah, I don't want to say too much, but yeah. But that's a great point though. Like anytime that a team is going to run 2 to 3 or something, maybe it's too strong. But at the same time,
they're not crazy. Like that's the other thing I want to stress is like we don't want to be crazy about our changes because we don't think anything is like flying off the handle like wildly. You know, you see stuff and some stuff that seems far is really close. You know, to being balanced. It seems like it's really strong, and one thing is going to turn it. You know,
but some players can negate a certain build that maybe other players haven't figured out how to negate that yet. So, yeah, but LEs are definitely strong. So they will be having some investments, but at the same time, they have other things that are really weak. A lot of classes, one of the big balance pushes we're doing right now is we want to bring up a lot of the weak stuff, the weak traits and the weak weapons, the weak heals for all the classes to kind of bring everybody up to that level.
Yeah, let's talk about heals because I think it's like a thing that I care much about. Like, you only get 3, right? So like, if one of those or 2 of those choices are bad, like, it limits your choices to 1, right? And then of course that's not a very interesting choice. And like, as soon as there's a second heal, it's like, okay, well, like, this heal is like a glyph and it's better now. Like, this is a bad example because I think the LE glyph is really strong, but like, this heal is a glyph and now I'm using this. Like, maybe glyph builds are important now. Like, this heal is a shout, and shouts used to be bad, but now that I have another shout on my bar, like, maybe because this heal is now good, maybe there's something to it. And so, you know, I think that we get a lot of interconnectivity between stuff, and so one trait getting better makes you want to run sword, and running sword makes you want to run this other offhand, and that offhand makes you want to run this other trait. And when you run that trait, all of a sudden, like, you're going to change your heal, and then, like, if this heal has now been buffed, like, now that build works all of a sudden. And
that's all great, but let's try to get back to I think what you're addressing, just how strong are LEs. LEs are also one of the classes that are very skill dependent. I think there's a lot that they can do, but you've got to be a master to get the most out of that class. And I think that maybe what we're seeing anyway is that, for instance, the thief at lower rating levels is much more dominant than the LE is. But then when you get to the middle and the higher levels, the LE takes over from the thief, and they start to become more powerful. So that's one of those things, too, that we have to keep in mind is, you know, how is this class perceived at the different levels of skill? And that's something that we're also trying to keep in mind.
I see Lowell making funny faces. I think Lowell has some feels on this.
Speak your mind, bro.
Nothing special. Like, my past is just scarred by LEs. That's it.
So I'm wondering, you guys spoke to the fact that you're looking at how a class is perceived at the different skill levels. Are you guys like trying to balance it for all those, or are you just trying to balance it for the high level but still making it so the low levels can understand it and not get crushed by it? Or are you trying to balance it for low level players, or what?
Part of it's education, right? Part of it's the fact that we need to get streaming going, you know, spectator mode. Once you start to have those types of things, once you start to have better explanation to the player base of how things work, I think that they'll understand why the top tier might have a perception of why, oh, none of us run that, and here's exactly how you shut it down. Right now, I think that it's hard to disseminate that type of knowledge to maybe the newer players in the game, so they have a harder time. So what they do is they go with the thing that's easiest to use, which at the low levels is just take a thief, get your Heartseeker daggers out, and just start wrecking faces. You know what I mean? That's one of the things we're trying to balance. That yes, we have to balance for the high level, but we also have to make it easy enough to understand for the low level and the mid level as well.
And so we talked about bringing up heals, also bringing up like weapon sets or traits. You know, the problem with, like, in the LE case, is the effective LE builds are the high skill cap ones. Like, there can be, you know, maybe they don't have to be as effective, but there should be effective low skill cap LE builds. There need to be, like, for instance, there are definitely some effective low skill cap thief builds. Backstab, you know, Basilisk Venom comes to mind, right? And, like, there are a lot of effective low skill cap Guardians builds, right?
I think we're roboting, by the way.
Okay.
Do I sound like a robot as well?
Actually, we're just using our robot voice.
Oh, nice.
I don't hear robot. Do you?
Yeah, I don't hear it.
Oh, it's
fixed.
back.
You're
okay,
back.
There we go.
to
We're good.
normal.
We're good.
Okay. Well,
Stop being a robot, dude.
anyway, you know, there's that. Like, so you talk about balancing for, like, the high end and low end. I think there's a sense of, like, if we can make both high, you know, you're never going to make low skill cap builds as good as the high skill cap ones, but if we can bridge that gap a little bit, it helps us balance at both of those levels at the same time a little bit.
It's a great question because, Java, what we look at usually is we want to balance for high, mid, and low, but obviously the high is where people can exploit and push the systems further than anywhere else. But also we want to make sure that we're balancing for the story chain, for the events, for the dungeons, for world versus world, for PvP, and we're trying to keep those numbers the same for all those things, such that once people learn their build and the capacities and the limitations of their build in one of those formats, they know it in all others. So we try not to split too much, but it's another thing too where we might need to split some things, because like I don't think that I would bring the same Ellie right now that I would bring in PvP. I wouldn't bring the same Ellie to World v World. Like it would be a different Ellie spec. Same thing with dungeons, that kind of stuff. Like that's one of the things we have to keep in mind too.
All right, I don't want to make this like an Ellie bashing party or anything like that. I mean, there's obviously other problems out there as well, I guess. Trap Rangers comes to mind, especially their ability to hold a point and then also debunk a point if need be. Have you guys looked at a Ranger at all?
He's also very strong.
Yeah, Trap Ranger is strong. We talk about him a lot, but at the same time, like, I like that there are strong builds. I'd rather that there were strong builds and strong counters, and we're trying to find the line between where it becomes like builds that are the thing that are important versus like how do you use those builds. So there needs to be more Ranger builds, and there needs to be more interesting strong builds like the Trap Ranger build. Maybe it's a little too strong, but like at least we can talk about it, and it's a build, and it's like a thing people can use, and it's a thing that like drives like discussion. Whereas like there's other things like Spirit Rangers. It's like they used to be a build like this, right, where they were dominant, and we don't want to like just take away. We don't want to do what to Trap Rangers what we did to the Spirit Rangers, right, where it's like they just went away. So I think it's more important to like. That's why I said looking at weapons. There are a lot of places where it's just like there's just this weapon is just terrible, and like if you could just use this, like there would be a build here, and so this is specifically speaking in PvP, I think too. And so I think it's more important for us to first get to the point where there are more builds that are strong builds than to worry about like smushing down those ones that are maybe a little stronger than the others.
There's two other factors too. Two terms that we like to use here. One is we don't want to play whack-a-mole with the classes. We don't want to, exactly what John's talking about with the spirit stuff. We don't want to just say, okay, double dagger Ellie, bam, you hit. We don't want to say, okay, the staff Ellie in World v World, bam, you're just completely taken down in power. We don't want to say that the Trap Ranger, okay, we're taking you out of the game, bam, you're completely ripped up and you are not viable anymore. We don't want to do that. What we'd rather do is try to bring everybody up to the same level. So we're trying to be really cognizant of not just doing whack-a-mole, which is bam, 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 this is bad, okay, maybe we took too much power away, now let's bring it back up again. That's just playing whack-a-mole. That's just one of the things we're trying to be really, really cautious of. The second thing that I would talk about too is what we term an apex predator, to use kind of an ecological kind of term. If you have an apex predator, let's say that it's a certain, like the Trap Ranger, that's just one of the best Rangers you can run, and it's just so versatile and it's so strong that it keeps other Ranger builds from being able to come up and assert themselves as viable builds in the meta. So we want to be really careful to make sure that we don't have too many apex builds that are just, if let's say that there's a Necro, like if you're just going to run a Necro, you have to run this build, it's the only way to play. If you're running anything else, you're just running it wrong. Warrior kind of has some of that sometimes. So we have to be really careful to balance that. Thief has it too, like for new players especially, that this is just the best way to play it. We want to be really careful of that, make sure that we have a lot of diversity for those things. So those are other things that we factor into balance a lot.
I hear Underwater Ranger's really good. I think there's a patch devoted to that, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, Mesmers are also kind of good underwater.
Underwater.
Yeah.
From what we were talking about with Trap Rangers, I'd want to say the NA meta over the last couple of weeks has morphed into most teams bring 2 Rangers right now, and obviously they're both Trap Rangers. But I think that's a reflection of the fact that myself and Vendetta, both wanted to play a Ranger for a while, and they were just copying us. It's not necessarily the Trap Rangers are that good. That specifically, I'd want to say that Trap Rangers don't kill us. Like Ellies can kill us, but Trap Rangers don't. There's a lot of ways to counter them that people just don't understand yet.
You
Sorry,
mean
what'd you
kill
say?
Trap Rangers?
When you say us, you mean the Ellie can't kill the Trap, or the Ellie can kill the Trap Rangers? When you say us, you mean Trap Rangers specifically? Not the players, right?
Just anything. People on our team can be killed by an Ellie, but people on our team don't get killed by Trap Rangers.
Okay.
And especially even our other Trap Rangers, like other Trap Rangers can't really do much to us because other people just aren't understanding how to play against them properly because they haven't been around that long. And I think that's the main problem right there, that it's not that they're that good, it's they haven't been around long enough for people to understand them.
So this is also, we've used this example before in other games, but so like early StarCraft 2, there were some units that were just much too strong for how powerful they were for what they costed. You know, when I played back in beta and stuff like that, when you see some of those classes, sometimes you'll say, oh, this thing is just completely broken, and then people go, oh wait, I found this way to deal with this. Somebody else finds it, oh, I found that way to deal with it too. So the meta basically shifts because it gets pushed out of the meta by people just learning, which is exactly what you're talking to. And there's
Right.
a balance between that and then just saying, no, this thing is just objectively, mathematically too strong. It's not about, you know what I mean? There's a balance there that you always try to find when you're doing balance. Because
Right.
sometimes you just gotta let people fix the meta itself. Sometimes the
Right.
meta will fix itself.
There's a balance between counters and like permanent vigor, swiftness, fury, prot, and regen, right? Like there's a midpoint in between those
Sure,
things,
sure.
right? So
Lowell, do trap rangers still exist in the future?
Excuse me? Like,
the future.
you were asking me if Trump
Yeah, do
Rangers
they
still
do,
exist?
Well, those
Because
years are from the future, right?
Oh,
I
okay.
think EU in
Israel.
general.
Oh, and yeah, in Europe, that's true.
Oh, okay, so Europe is the future. Yeah,
Right,
of course.
yeah, you
it
are.
exists. Yeah, they exist.
Sorry.
But I don't think they're anywhere near elementalist level. So,
All right.
Right, as Lowell was saying, I don't think Trap Rangers are really popular over there because the EU servers didn't have a team like ours that was just using two of them, and we're not using two of them because they're strong. We're using two of them just because it's what we felt like playing. And the fact that so many other teams adopted this two-ranger strategy, but we haven't had to counter against it because they're not strong enough to need to be countered. You know, we don't have to change our build at all. Whereas in the past, every time a meta has come about, whether it be copying us or copying some other team, we design a new team strategy to defeat that new meta, but we don't have to do it with the Trap Rangers because they just aren't strong enough to justify new builds.
Well, I think the point is that I mean, for a while your comp was essentially two rangers, two Ellies, and a guardian. There's not a lot of variety there, and that's what I kind of opened up this discussion with. Anytime that you run two of the same profession on a team, it kind of just speaks to like the lack of diversity.
That smacks to me of the Apex Predator problem that we talked about, that if an Ellie just does his job better than anybody else can do it, why would you run something besides an Ellie? If the Ranger's just doing his job better than anybody else can do it, why would you run something besides that particular build Ranger? That's what we mean by the Apex Predator problem, that we just say he's just better than everybody else at what he does, so that means he's too strong.
All right, fair enough. Where do we want to go with this here? Well, so
Just talk about ninjas?
ninjas, pirates,
Just talk
perhaps.
about ninjas.
All right. You released your balance philosophy a couple months ago with I don't remember which, was it November patch, I think, is when you released that. How do you guys feel that you're sticking to that? Pretty close, or do you have a ways to go?
I think a lot of the philosophy is still there. There's also some stuff too where there's some things that are imbalanced. They're imbalanced because of bugs that we're having to rework how some of those systems work. Like right now, there is the balance of the new map, right, with the buffs that you can take stuff while you're invulnerable. That's not really balanced. That's just, it shouldn't work that way. That just needs to be fixed. That's a bug. That's kind of a balance thing. So a lot of the philosophy from then is still carrying over to how we want to balance things. We're just being really careful to not over destroy certain builds like the Ranger and the Ellie. We want to bring them down a little bit, but we don't want to whack-a-mole them either. So we're trying to be really careful with that.
What parts of the Ellie are you aiming to nerf? Are you aiming to nerf the tank Ellies or the dagger DPS Ellies or what?
Those are the two major things. We want to look at. I think that part of the problem with the Ellie is that he just has so many small things that are they're a little bit more efficient than they probably should be. And when you add all these little bitty things up, these little bitty traits, buff durations, things like that, little bitty heals, things that you're getting from cantrips switching over, you're getting a lot of little bitty efficiency that's a little bit stronger than maybe what it should be. So for him, it's more of just looking at all those little pieces and how they go together. So the two big ones are just the ability to take damage, do a lot of dodging, protection, regen, which is the more the market thing, and then just the double dagger Ellie, who just has a lot of just really useful tools, can dish out some damage when he needs to, can spike when he needs to, and he's still he's pretty survivable, pretty mobile. Okay.
Sorry, I just
John's having some
coughing
coughing
fit,
today.
so-
Sorry about that.
get some water or something.
All right. I mean, I guess there's obviously a lot of different classes we could be discussing. Is there any that you guys wanted to come on and talk about particularly besides those two? I know you mentioned AoE nerfs a couple months back, and we haven't really seen
I
that
want to talk
yet.
about engineer.
John wants to talk about engineer. Okay.
Let's do it.
Because I feel like he's a little underloved right now. So, like, that's, I think, the thing too is, like, I just talked about it. That, like, I think right now we're focused on stuff that's low and not on stuff that's high. So we feel like there's just not enough diversity, and so we don't even know how it's going to feel when there's more options. And so what we've been doing, like, sort of like engineer, like his kits, like we're looking at the engineer kits specifically. Like we know there's stuff we can do with the elixir gun, there's stuff we can do with the toolkit, there's stuff we can do with the flamethrower. I mean, I don't think anyone would argue that grenades are too terribly weak. There's some really good strength there.
Yeah.
There are engineers that play bomb stuff. We see like Teldo and his bomb engineer, like it really hasn't gone away. It's still got some effectiveness. But just engineers, like, and the reason why I focus on him is he's the one that we're maybe talking about this the most with, but just he brings up that point of like, what undervalued things can we bring up? Because as you both of you guys have said, like the Trap Ranger, he has counters, and maybe that Ellie will have counters if certain engineer builds become viable. You know, maybe that Trap Ranger will have counters if there's new Thief builds, new Mesmer builds, new Necro builds, and so we'd rather bring new builds into the meta than take ones away.
All right, fair enough. A couple other people, Warrior, and I've been seeing a lot of Warrior complaints for a very, very long time. Just people saying they're not viable, but then I see Warriors run really successfully, like Fred on EU, obviously on Curse, and then there's also H-Man on NA. H-Man's really good. Java, obviously plays, I think Java has most games on Warrior out of anything. What are you guys' stance on the Warrior?
Condition removal? Is that what you said? Like, is that probably the thing that's hurting him the most? He's not, it's not like the Warrior's ineffective. Like, if you can facilitate the Warrior, he's incredibly strong.
But let's be clear. Maybe Java can speak to this too, or Lowell. Like, I think that he's one of those guys who suffers from. He has a few builds or a few weapon sets that outshine everything else, and because of that, he's kind of pigeonholed into what he can bring to a team right now.
You're talking about rifle, right? Just rifle?
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure.
What do you guys feel about that?
I feel like there's actually one that was sort of up and coming team before the 2-team Q thing came out. It was using 2 longbow greatsword warriors and doing really well with it. Consistently getting to Kylo. Like they were beating basically everyone except us, as far as I'm aware. And they'd give us a good game, and that was 2 longbow warriors. So I think it speaks to the fact that Trap Rangers, people say, are so overpowered now, but they really didn't get any buffs, and Rangers were useless for the first couple months of the game until people till good players started playing a build on the Ranger. And I think Warriors might be that way as well. That I personally only basically played one Warrior build, and it works pretty well until team fights start happening, which is all the meta's about right now, is team fights. So I can't bring it to that, but it might be that there's other Warrior builds that just haven't been found yet that are really good, such as those 2 longbow warriors that did so well.
How about you?
It's just like, it's not about Warrior being bad from my point of view. It's mostly about what is too good right now. And like when you have like 5 people in a team fight running around with a frost aura, well, Warriors aren't going to be happy about that. So of course you don't see many of them. But yeah, like when stuff gets balanced, I think things will work out. Like, if anything, Warrior is probably the most balanced profession right now, in my opinion, and everything else is either lower or higher and should be Warrior level. That's my point of view.
Well, I think the Warriors are still really good at 1v1, 2v2 situations. Like, they're one of the best things you're going to want in a situation like that, but the game's just not like that currently, so.
All right, fair enough.
What do you think is driving the team fight thing?
Robots.
Well, for one, it's AoEs are do as much damage as single target. So why wouldn't you just bring an AoE class instead of a single target class? But also just the 3 cap point mechanic by itself is just basically always going to be driving people to only be fighting in 2 places, like 1 small fight on a side point and 1 large fight at the middle, or just 1 large fight at the middle. And that's basically what's driving it. Just the 3 cap point mechanic by itself, I think.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the intention of the 3 cap point mechanic was to generate kind of 2 points of conflict, and that this is on purpose. That's why we went with 3. And it also was the intention that the secondaries would then kind of relieve some of that pressure. So I think to some extent it's map dependent, maybe. I don't know if that's true to you also.
I think this might be like something like Legacy is such a, it just feels like it's basically just 3 cap points. Because you don't care with the secondary, which means it just becomes a fight over the middle, and then it's maybe flanked to their side sometimes. Otherwise, it's just
Doubly so, the layout on that one kind of generates a single cap point fight more than any other. Because almost every path goes through that center from the 2 sides anyway.
I think someone at ArenaNet headquarters is torrenting right now. You guys getting a little robot-y. I don't know. It seems it's better now, but it's done it a couple times. All right. Well, how we doing on time?
About an hour in, looks like. Hour-ish.
Well, how long you guys here? How long you scheduled for?
We can do a little bit more. We need to eat food at some point. We need to take some oils and get our ears fixed up.
I need to be oiled.
I need to be oiled.
Yeah.
I need to be oiled.
Not oiled up, just
While we're talking about team fights,
Sure.
I wanted to bring up the bug from this last patch with Necros and sometimes Mesmers and Vengeance Warriors not rallying people when they're killed, which is having a really big impact on team fights because most of the top teams have at least one Necro and, of course, a Mesmer. So it's making it very difficult whenever, that's the only target you really can go for on their team because they'll have, 3 tanks and a Necro. So you got to go for the Necro, and the Necro doesn't rally you. It's just, it's really difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, when you might get that fixed.
I mean, we honestly don't have, good repro cases on why the Necro isn't rallying you. That's the truth. I mean, that's why we don't.
We do have multiple bugs, but then the bugs are saying different situations. So we're trying to find out the commonality between those different situations.
Right.
That's what we're trying to look at right now.
So you'll fix it whenever you figure it out?
Yeah, to me, that's the kind of thing we would make
bug.
A build for.
Yeah, that's a game-breaking bug.
Or we would at least push to have a build for once we knew what was wrong with it, right? Or once we knew we had a fix for it.
Yeah.
Because anytime you have basically what's a bug that's dictating meta shifts, that's a pretty big bug, I would say. Same thing if we went to, the same thing we're having right now with invulnerability capping on Simple the Silent Storm. That's a really big thing that just basically says, hey, I'm going to misform and just take this from you. And hey, guess what? We just won the game because of that. That becomes a very important thing. So,
if we have the fix for the invuln and it's tested and we're a ways away from a build, we would not hold it, right? That's the kind of thing, they're the kind of things that, depending on whether or not it's been tested, whether we have the fix, whether or not it's been tested, and whether or not we're basically in the throes of preparing the next build anyway, then we would decide whether or not that's what kind of makes us push those things. But it's hard for those 3 things to often coincide because there's a build every 3 or 4 weeks maybe, as is. So the timing of the testing doesn't often come in at the right time for us to legitimately just throw a build up.
All right. Well, I know we're running short on time, so I did have 2 more things I wanted to cover, and we can just do them briefly, I guess. Okay. First off, incentives on bringing PvEers into PvP, essentially. The PvP base, it's shrinking, but player retention is not really an issue here because there's no subscription turnover. Everyone's already bought the game. We're all here already, right? And they can just come back anytime. But it would be nice if we can just try to get more people involved in PvP.
That's actually not true, though, what you just said.
Okay.
Yeah.
The numbers are so because of the recent changes. The numbers are actually going up. We think that a lot of people are coming to PvP who normally wouldn't, because it's easier to get in, and because of those tickets, we're actually seeing those numbers going up now.
Okay, well that's good to hear then.
Yeah, I would definitely say that
But it's still a good point though about incentivizing the PvE players to come over to PvP. That's still very much something we're very focused on, and making sure that those people when they come in, Grouch, that they have a quick understanding of how to play the game, that they're kind of we hold them by the hand a little bit more to kind of teach them the game. Don't let things be so difficult. We have plans for that.
I mean, let's not even. There's not we can't say this. In the next patch, we're changing the default PvP build, right? Because the ones that are there now are just bad. They're not good.
They smack up a meta of 8 months ago.
Maybe let's not be fair. It's more 17 months ago.
Sure.
It's a 17-month-old meta that those builds are for, and so we redid those to things that we think are more reasonable in the current meta. And so as you come into PvP, if you haven't played before, you load up Warrior, you're gonna get something that at least is, competent in the current meta. So that's going to help. But that's one way, just one way that we're actually going to try and we will do something about it in the next, couple weeks, basically.
Sure.
I don't. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, you go ahead.
I was gonna say I don't PVE much, so I had to do a little googling on this little Wikipedia. But there's a new currency system called the Laurels, right? Okay, and this is for getting ascended gear or whatever PVE gear essentially, right?
Sure.
Have you thought about adding the Laurels to the PvP dailies, and that way, like people who PvP daily can kind of get back into the PvE side of the game? I haven't played it that much, but it's something that does interest me. But I prefer the PvP side. But it'd be nice to combine both portions of the game. People who PvE can go, oh, I want to get my free Laurel for the day, come over, play a couple matches, do whatever the daily is, and then head back.
We think it would be awesome if we had more crossover between the two different player types. So we're definitely looking at ways that we can do that. Some of that is just going to be incentivizing them with rewards that kind of carry over to best places. I can't give too many details on that.
Yeah, I mean, we'd love to see, that we've talked about things that, this isn't necessarily going to happen, but things like giving those daily PvE things glory boosters, right? Where they're like, oh, what's this for?
Mm-hmm.
Cool, for PvP, let me go play it and get my glory boost and see what this is about,
And at the same time, there's a lot of PvP players who maybe they have a bunch of buddies who are all doing a lot of dungeon runs. Like, well, I don't PvE, I can't come play dungeons with you guys, really. I'm not really ready for it. What if they were getting things in PvP that allow them to go do that with their friends? So we're looking at ways to go back and forth.
The Laurel is a good point, but I think there are other ways to do it too. So, and it's definitely on our mind.
You mentioned the glory booster, so this is my last topic I have. It's about basically PvP currency. Java has over 1 million glory, and there's nothing to spend it on. I know I wouldn't want to open 1,000 chests and just to break down all the gear and then have too many mats. Like, what is the plan for glory? Is there a plan?
Yeah, we just can't.
For glory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For glory. We have there's two things there. One is a really big high-level thing that I can't talk about. The other thing is just the incentivization of stuff. We want people to be able to spend that glory on more stuff that's either going to be better for PvP or PvE stuff directly, which we've kind of hinted at. But maybe you can take that and you can transfer it over to different parts of the game, or you could actually just spend it on things that you want to have in PvP that you normally couldn't get. So I can't talk too much about it yet. But yeah, it's a problem that we know that, hey, there should be more crossover here. There should be more for these players to do with this glory. They can't spend it. They've maxed out. They have all the armor that they actually have the look that they want. What do they do with it now? There's no answer in game for that right now, so we have to fix that.
Right. All right. Just the two other currencies then. Gems. So, are we going to see those back on the 1v1 paid tournaments? I mean, what is the plan for gems in PvP?
We may. We just pulled those when we started doing the test because we didn't know what that was going to do to the economy for that stuff. Mm-hmm. And since we wanted to see, we just wanted to test the one-on-one with easier to get into, so it's only 2 teams, and then we wanted it to be bring down the ticket prices. So we wanted to be really careful with the rewards there to make sure that we didn't blow up the economy as we did it. So we might start interjecting more of that stuff back in. But when we made that call, we said, okay, this is the test. Let's just test it to be safe. Let's pull that stuff out so that we don't blow up our economy.
All right, for like right now, you can only get silver chests. So when do you plan on? I guess it doesn't really matter, obviously, but like when does it? When do you plan on? I guess equalizing the rewards and the chests.
It certainly doesn't matter to Lowell and Java, but it matters to people who don't have all that stuff, right? So that's just I don't know. I'm probably gonna go look at it today, honestly, because it's just,
it's one of those things too where we have to be careful with it because we don't want to blow up the economy, but at the same time it's a really big problem because that's a big incentivization piece. Like before, people love the random gem thing, right? Like they love that. I might get completely trounced in here, but I might get some really cool stuff anyway. So it kind of made me want to kind of put that
even
money
just
in.
The gold chest being just gone.
Yeah, it's just really bad.
That's just bad. That's just this was a test for a week, right? Now we're realizing it's not just gonna and it was a test for a week, and then it was gonna be okay, back to the old thing, and we'll work on doing the test thing for real, and then implement it for real. Sure. And then it was like, wow, this test was way too effective, and it's just so much better for the game. And so now it's not a test anymore, and now we have to go through and undo all of the kind of temporary things that were okay when it was a test and just aren't okay when it's permanent anymore. Yep. Which is, for instance, like you said, being stuck on the same map, not having the gold chest, like not having those gems. Like we have to do all like the work that we did for that for tournaments to figure out what the right numbers and what the right things are. We have to do that again.
That's one of those things too that format. Especially Peters and I, we have a lot of control over balance and over PvP and design of we work with very close with those teams. We get to work with those guys. But that's more of an economy question. We have in-house economists and people like that who actually help us to make sure that we don't blow up our own economy when we do that stuff. So we have people that we have to run those things by. So just to make the quick test, we said let's just pull it out to be safe, get the tests in there, help the player base, and then when we're ready, we'll start to interject more of that stuff in once we're sure what's safe and what's not.
Okay, fair enough. The last PvP currency, I guess, this one's kind of controversial, QP. And this isn't a slight to Java or anyone else who puts a lot of time in the ladder, but I won't say it's a completely just an indication of how much time you spend on the game, but like even by Java's own admission earlier, he spends 10 hours playing the game a day. So he's able to rank up a lot of QP. What is the eventual plan for QP, and how is that going to tie in with the MMR system, and like where are we headed?
Talk about it?
I can talk a little bit. I mean, like, so John hinted earlier about the idea of like tournaments and scheduled tournaments and monthly tournaments, and like I said, that they're a thing that's a when kind of thing and not an if kind of thing, and that's really what the QPs are all about. And that, as far as like ranking people by QP, that's obviously ridiculous compared to ranking people by matchmaking rating once that is stabilized. And so right now we're ranking them by QP. So by, if you think past it for a few seconds, hopefully that's not what we're going to be doing soon. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I can see. I mean, it did make sense to put it in. It gave people
some
measure.
It gave us something.
But it's not just that. But we wanted to try the idea that you basically have to qualify for some of the bigger tournaments. So the people, people like Java and Lowell, they're basically qualifying to get basically the currency to get into the really big tournaments, which we can't talk about yet. But that gives us a metric of then you have a leaderboard to look at and see your QPs to know where you rank against other people and how close you are to be able to get into those tournaments. So we want to use that for that. We've also talked about just using the QPs as a way of rewarding the top players with certain things, which I can't get into too much about, but we want to be able to use those things as kind of a metric to say who are the top players, what have they earned in the game, how much time have they played, that kind of stuff, and then use those as kind of a reward thing that I can't say too much about.
Yeah. Right, like I think the QP thing, the nice thing about it is it's likely that the person at the top of the QP boards are the best. The problem is it becomes fuzzy like right after the first couple of people, because then there can be really good people who don't play a lot, but the people who play a lot and are really good are going to be at the top. But after that, the accuracy of it just drops off very rapidly, because there's some people who just have earned a lot by playing a lot, and some people who have just earned a lot by being really good and winning every time they play. And so, but the people who are really good, win every time they play, and play a lot are probably the best players and are in fact at the top of that. But it's not the way we want to rank people.
Sure.
Right. So, and we have, or as you know, like there is another way that we can rank people now, but it's just not stable yet.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's all I had personally. Sorry, we're kind of running the show here completely. I didn't mean to overshadow Lowell or Java here.
We also, you have to tell us to stop talking.
Yeah.
Java mentioned in the chat a couple seconds ago. He has a couple questions, and then I guess we'll grab Lowell, and then we'll kind of wrap it up, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. Go for it.
I was wondering, so in the post that was made, you guys said that the February patch would be having these ratings and bring a new map. But obviously the new ratings are already here, and it's been said for a while that February would be like the big PvP patch, but that would make it seem that the big PvP patch is just one new map. Like, is that?
That's not, so yeah, a few things. We never said exactly when the PvP patch would be, the big one. There's other stuff coming too, so I want you guys to know that the matchmaking's coming, that's cool, the new map's coming, but there's actually other stuff that we're referring to when we say the big patch. So there's other stuff too, that's not it. I just can't say what it is, but it's...
Yeah, it's hard not to talk about it because it's starting to get to be sort of tangible on our end, but at the same time, nobody wants it not working.
Yeah.
So
I'm trying
just
to
in the same way that people didn't want, tournaments not working when we released and we had to take them down, that we don't want that to happen again. Like, the next time we release something that's that important for PvP, it will stay because we need it to be working completely. And we know what those things are, and by the next time we release a thing, it's probably more like things. So because there's a lot of like John said, burners. It's not like the PvP team isn't the whole company, but at the same time, it's not tiny. There's more there are people working on it, and there are more than one thing that those people are working on. And
essentially, what we're trying to do is we're trying to take a lot of the major features that you need for a really healthy player versus player game, and get them to all line up such they all hit at the same time, and then when they're all ready at the same time, then we would put them all up together. That's what we're referring to when we say the big patch. Just a lot of features that would just, maybe this one's moving really quickly and this one needs to catch up, and then we want them to all kind of hit at the same time. So
but at the same time, if something is ready and we think it's not dependent on those other things, like we'll get it out. Like, if something became ready for February, even though we haven't talked about it, we would still put it out in February.
Like the matchmaking stuff. We were like, this is good, this is working. Let's just
right,
go
and so we just
it.
started, and so we turned it on and let it just go, and we talking about it a little bit because we decided it's just kind of ready to talk about a little bit, even though, the real benefit of it, which is taking advantage of it.
It's kind of a judgment call because we're like, do we want to have one big patch that's got these cool 5 or 6 things that we've talked about before but never actually had, or like the matchmaking? Do we want to go ahead and put that out as soon as it's ready? We thought that it's healthier for the game to have it as soon as it's ready. So that takes away a little bit from that big patch that we talked about last year. But at the same time, we played the players. It benefits them now. So why wouldn't we do it now? So we decided to just go ahead and do it now for that. So.
All right, fair enough. Did you have anything else, Java?
Also, I was wondering if February patch might see the sort of thing I asked about earlier with not facing the same team over and over. Because with where we are now, if there's either JBUO or Vex playing at the time, we'll play for literally 4 or 5, even 6 hours straight and only face that team every single game for for hours and hours. So
taking notes. I like it.
Probably not for this patch, but it's something that we will, that's what we're doing. We're putting down notes now to who we go talk to after we're done with this. So probably not for this patch, but it's something that we'll go see if we can push it quicker. We'll see.
Yeah, it's the thing that, and this is the thing why we turn on the matchmaking, and it's like, oh, these are things that don't work because it's only matchmaking works fine. The other one team versus one team is kind of temporary, and all of a sudden that creates this thing that didn't exist before. And it's if we had known that we kind of turned both those things on at the same time without realizing that, oh, that's going to create this thing, and that's the thing we haven't accounted for yet because we haven't really built all of the systems or the 1v1 thing yet, right? So,
but in testing, we had 3 major things that came out, and that was one of the major things that came out. So we'll just see if we can push it faster than we thought we were before.
All right. Anything else, Java?
Oh, that's good. Lowell, you had something?
Yeah, I just have kind of small details, but a lot of people have been wondering about them for a while. Do you guys have any plans for character-specific keybinds? Because, from profession to profession, people have been wondering.
Sure.
There's an entire design for it that was written up, I'd say, a year ago. So it's on the list. It was basically I don't know if you remember when the keybinds were really, really bad and you couldn't even, bind Alt-1 or Shift-1 or Control-1. It was sometime in beta. And then we went and said, okay, we're going to redo things, and we're going to do, be able to bind mod keys. And at that time, we basically said, oh, we should also try and get, saving binds and character-specific binds, and basically just saving binds, and, because WASD and then Q is my F1 when I'm a warrior, but as soon as I'm an Ellie, I have to move where my attunements are. That's one of the most extreme examples, obviously. Whereas the guys who focus on a single, Necros, you get your one. Everyone that has a single F1 ability, they have I tend to bind them similarly, but ones that have multiple F abilities, I tend to bind them differently. So that whole design called for that, and it's a thing that's on the back burner, but it's just.
What if we real quick explain kind of how that works as far as priorities and plates and what's on people's plates and stuff a little bit? Talk about it a little bit. Maybe.
Could, I guess, yeah.
So kind of what John's talking about is that's one of those things that's on. Everybody kind of has their own stuff, so we might have a bug or a request or design doc written for something. But that means that everybody in the company has multiple things that they're working on at any time. So a lot of it's just prioritization, and that person has to say, okay, these are the 8 different things that I have to work on right now. Let me do the most important first. The second most important, I'll do that next. So that's one of those things that it's there, it's on somebody's plate, but that person might be working on other stuff at this time that's more important for the game than that one thing. So that's kind of why it's something. And you talked to earlier, Job, about well, we want to not face the same team. That's something that's on someone's plate right now, but it's is that as important as these other major features that person's working on. So that's kind of how, that's always the debate for us every single day as developers is, these are the 15 things I need to do today. What's the most important? What's the second most important? What's the third most important? So that's how some things will kind of be like, it was on a list 3 weeks ago. Why is it not done yet? Well, because other things got put onto the list that was actually more important. So that's just kind of how that stuff works as developers. So.
Right, and someone brought this up. I was like chatting with someone literally just in game chat about this, and they were like, "Oh, like doesn't make sense. Like, why would you ever build a system that? Why can't you just turn on another game mode? It's like in Unreal, I can just make a new game mode, and it's like, well, we don't use the Unreal editor. We have like our own tools, and I'm like, why do you have that? And it's like this is how game development works. Like, it was just kind of this moment of like, it's easier to forget that like. You guys are just there and you're playing the games. You're having fun. Like, you guys don't have to worry about things like if we want to support another game mode, we have to build UI for it. We have to like get the UI team to help design that UI. We have to, and like, you shouldn't have to worry about that, but it's nice to maybe know about it so that when you're wondering, hey, why don't we have these things? Like, it's because we have to prioritize where that support goes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So.
All right, fair enough. Lowell, was that all you had?
No, just one more.
Right.
Just a little bit at the beginning of the evening, like you just talked about the fact that you have like different plans for different type of ratings, etc. But like a big question out there is like, are there any plans for a solo queue like straight? So about like you guys at the beginning of the show talked about different kinds of ratings that you were expecting to put in, etc. But a big question out there is like about solo queue. Are there any plans for a real straight up solo queue? Like,
it's
yes,
getting
no?
shaky again. I mean, other than like you're saying solo queue, but never get matched with, only play with solo queue players.
Yep.
Exactly, like a random team of 5 rated.
And it's always random. Every team you face is random.
Well, based on the rating, of course, but
Yes, but I guess my question is that really more beneficial than the idea that if you're a solo queued team, that the likelihood of you facing another solo queue team is so much higher that you're just going to probably face them 90% of the time, but anyway, but that if we can find it, but if we happen to find a team that's like 3 solos and a 2-person, that like we'd just rather get you a game, like. That's really the trade-off, actually, that you're talking about, right?
The short answer is it's something that we know is a really big concern, and it's something that we want to look at doing. The problem that we're kind of being really careful about is this: is that in Guild Wars 1, we had major PvP types. We had halls, we had GVG, we had randoms, we had teams, we had all this stuff that we brought in with factions. Like, what we basically took our player base and we split it up to multiple places. So what we want to do is we want to make a system where solo queues are rewarded and mostly fight against other solo queues. But at the same time, we don't want to have a completely different area that they go to play because we don't want to split up our player base. So we do want to have something like that, a system that accommodates that. We have other ideas for how we want to do that first. And if that doesn't work, we can look at just doing a solo queue. But we want to let players play that type of game, not worry about getting raffle stomped by a team every time. But at the same time, what we're trying to balance is we don't want to split up the player base to like 6, 7, 8 different types of subsets of PvP. Because in Guild Wars 1, that really hurt our player base. So we're trying to learn from that.
I think if you look at like critical mass too, and you have like all those players together, if everyone is really playing together, and you're right, solo queue is popular, what's going to end up happening is there are going to be a lot of teams that are teams made up of 5 random guys, because that's how a lot of people play. And then what's going to happen is because there are a lot of those teams, when you are one of those teams, you're almost every time going to play another one of those teams because it's one of the first things that the matchmaking is going to favor, right? And so therefore, splitting it only creates like a separation of those things, but it doesn't actually help. The only time you're going to run into problems is like edge cases, and instead, like, we'd rather not split and only have a few edge cases, but like keep everyone together to some extent, right?
And our philosophy there is like if you play a MOBA solo queue or if you play Guild Wars 1 solo queue, what we're really trying to do, why are you playing that style, and what's the most fun you can get out of that? For me, the best part of random arenas was actually after I win my games and I actually move up to team arena and I start kicking the crap out of team arena teams. That was the best part for me. That was what I enjoyed the most, is going with random people, getting a good team quickly, coming together as a team.
And a bond.
Yeah, that was really cool. So we want to get that feeling, and we know that a lot of players want to just play by themselves, play against other random people too. But again, we're just trying to protect the overall game to make sure that we're not putting people in too many different little rooms that nobody ever sees each other. So we're trying to balance those two out.
Like I said, like I think our matchmaking thing generally puts solo is gonna the goal of it is to put solo queue people together anyway. So
Sure.
more often than not, it's going to end up just being a solo queue on its own, and it's just going to be. It's going to have the ability to cover when the solo queue is low. Is really all that comes down to. It's like kind of the best of both worlds in that way. Because honestly, no one wants to solo queue if solo queuing means you have to wait for half an hour when otherwise you wouldn't. You know. At least I don't think they do.
I think we'll see some interesting threads in the forums about this topic.
Yeah.
Hopefully, anyways. Well, I guess we'll kind of wrap it up there. I guess people wish we could go for hours, but we do have schedules and whatnot.
An hour and a half, right?
Yeah,
We'll keep doing more too, right? This is really fun for us to get to interface with
we don't
you
mind.
guys,
yeah,
so.
and this is good timing for us, right? So.
Cool. Well, thanks again for coming on. This is
Yeah.
the second time we had Sharp, and hopefully we see you guys again.
Yep.
We enjoy it. And I really like the transparency. Trying to this is kind of like the most information that we can get out to the public at one time. It's good. I like it.
Yeah, we like it well.
Maybe get a couple slip ups on your guys' end. That'll be nice. But yeah,
Any mistakes? That's why we sound like robots.
they're editing you guys out in real time. Oh, don't say that. Well, anyways, thanks again to Lowell from Curse. Thanks, Lowell.
Hey, thanks, Lowell.
Thanks, Lowell.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Java.
Thanks.
All right. See you guys. All right.
Thanks, Grouch.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, guys, and yeah, have a good one.
Cool.
You too.